Welcome back to Rise and Rouse. This is your host, Erin Algood, social impact strategist, consultant, and frustrated changemaker. In this episode, you'll hear my conversation with Heather Hiscox, a consultant, author, talk show host, and frustrated changemaker / troublemaker. We talk about the tension of doing important, impactful work within organizations while also simultaneously wanting to burn it all to the ground. There are so many mic drop, mind-blowing points within this conversation, including an incredible story about invoicing. You'll have to listen to find out. Hello and welcome. Heather, I am so excited to have you here on Rise and Rouse. We are going to have so much fun talking about this, and I can't wait to hear all about just all of the amazing things that you're doing. But first, I'll just give like a quick intro to who you are and just get us started. How's that sound?
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
So Heather, you are a consultant. You're also the author of No More Status Quo, a proven framework to change the way we change the world, which makes me so excited. I love the book. I love how it looks. And we met through Leah Kroll, who was a guest on was a guest on season 2 of Rise and Rouse when she came on to talk about her book. And so it was so kind of her to make the introduction to you.
Oh, yes. She's awesome. I'm so glad that I got to meet you through her.
Yeah. I just gave like a snippet about like the work that you do, but can you please share a little bit more about your background and how you came to the work that you do now?
Yeah. I mean, what I call myself is a frustrated change maker. Yeah. And that kind of captures why I do what I do is that, working in this sector, working with community, working around program, policy, processes, I just found myself asking over and over again, like, are we actually making a difference? Is this work actually creating impact? Mm-hmm. Why are we designing programs, policies, all these things, and we haven't even talked to community members, or we haven't even talked to internal staff who are most impacted by what we're creating? What the heck is that leader up to? Like, what are they even thinking? And I just was asking that over and over again. And I really had to take a step back from the sector. And I really wanted to see like what else was out there. What were other people doing around problem solving and addressing challenges? So did a little detour into startup culture around corporate. Knew that was not for me, but I love the excitement that came with using some of like design thinking and human-centered design and some agile type processes, and just really putting the stakeholder at the center of all of the work that we do, and really just asking different questions, engaging different ways, pushing these different challenges and opportunities to be better and folks to show up in different ways. So that kind of falls under the umbrella for me of frustrated changemaker. What I do now is in my project work, I work with nonprofits, local governments, and philanthropic foundations across the U.S. to help them address challenges and opportunities. And then I have the book, which was just such a passion project of taking all that I've learned over more than a decade of doing this work and showing people how to do it and what it looks like in real life. And then I host an online talk show called Possibility Project. And that's all focused on, again, like convening a community of other frustrated change makers to have these really important conversations about issues that we must address within the social sector. So like to sum it all up, I'm just really asking the sector to be better and do better. And that's what really just drives all the things that I do.
That resonates with me so much because to be part of this sector is to be frustrated a lot.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. And that's a common thread that pops up in all of my work. And then I find people feeling like they need assurance around that tension that they feel. And I actually have a chapter in the book called Loving and Hating the Sector, because I feel that. And it's hard to show up and work in this space that you also want to tear apart.
Yeah.
And like, how do you do that on a daily basis? How do you, work within these harmful practices that we've adopted as best practices? How do you challenge the status quo when you're mired within it? When the people you love and all your peeps, right? They work in the sector with you, but how do you in a joint way, in a collaborative way, ask these different questions and, really try to shake it up? It's so hard. And so many people feel alone, and they're not at all.
Right. I'm so excited that we connected for so many reasons. And I had somebody who recently said to me that there's just generational divide between the younger folks and the older folks who are just kind of like, yeah, things take time and it'll just happen on its own pace and so on and so forth. And the younger generation, this person was lumping me in with the younger generation and saying, you all just want it to happen right now. And I was like, it took me a little bit to kind of think about it. And I'm like, actually, all of my work is about planting seeds. I don't expect to see the fruits of it for a while, right? Like, but I don't want to just be sitting on the sidelines and not planting seeds. Like, I think that's where that urgency piece comes in.
Yes. And when I work with teams and I work with individuals that may have been in this sector a long term, they might have worked in an organization for a long time. Mm-hmm. Some of those folks are like, this is the way we've always done it. We've tried that before. It didn't work. We're going to do these sort of things. And I love to have those people on teams because they do have significant institutional memory. They are deeply connected to others. They have very deep relationships with other folks. They're subject matter experts. They have so many fantastic qualities that can speak to the historical and current context. And I love working with new folks, right? Either they're new to the sector, they're just out of school and this is like one of their early jobs, or they're just like a really fresh thinker and they're the ones. And I hate to say it's like a binary, but it is a juxtaposition of like the foil of that, like this is the way we've always done it, is the person that's like, why do we do it that way? Who said? Why? What about this? Or I just learned this thing. I heard this podcast. I went to this conference and I'm so jazzed about the potential, the opportunities. And sometimes you would see those folks in conflict, but when I work with them in teams, it's awesome because that sort of new person brings such a different lens and energy to the work. And it really just, even if there might be some friction, it's good friction. It's good conversation to challenge people's thinking. And I think it's part of maturity and adulting a bit to realize that we are of a legacy, a deep ancestry of change makers, a deep ancestry of frustrated folks who still showed up. Even when hope was low, they still showed up. They still fought. They still challenged. They still questioned. And that's a beautiful thing to be part of that legacy.
Yeah, absolutely. Being part of that legacy is so important and allowing people to find themselves wherever they place within it, because like you said, like there's some of those folks who are in the newer, earlier stages of things who are kind of finding their footing. And then there's the not older, I shouldn't say. Again, it's not a dichotomy. There's the other folks who have been at it a little bit longer who might be in a different place. And I love that. Thank you.
And who knows what the next generation's bringing, right? We don't even know yet. We don't even know the ripple that we create. Who knows what's possible in the future? So it's even more exciting of like new world building, new imagination, new energy, passion, and focus. It's really exciting.
Yeah. I'm so interested because you also call yourself a troublemaker too. So I'm like very excited to hear more about that.
Well, when you're the one in the room that's asking those obnoxious questions, right? You're the one that's like poking and pushing in every room where you're like, excuse me, no. You cannot ignore that voice. You cannot get away with saying that. That is not okay. Like, what is even happening here? You definitely get treated and labeled as a troublemaker. And I just started to own that. I was so frustrated in so many different roles of like, why do I have to leave this place? I thought this was a good fit. I thought these were the right leaders. I thought this was the perfect mission. And then I put it to the test and was like, oh, dang it. They're posers.
Yep.
And like, oh, they're not aligned. They're not this. They're not this. They're not visionary. They're not innovative. They're not, they're not co-designing solutions. They're just sort of like, rolling forward, they're just falling to the best practice traps. And so I found that, okay, I'm not broken. The system was designed extremely poorly. And I am going to start to really challenge that system. I'm going to keep asking those questions and find my crew. Like, who are my folks that are also troublemaking and have that spirit and just want to, just keep pushing us to think differently.
Do you ever feel like this? Like where you've contracted with people, they've brought you in for these things, and then you're like, but you don't want to listen to me? Like, or you don't appreciate the questions I'm asking because like, isn't this what you're paying me for? Come on.
Oh, and I try so hard because for me, it's an ethical issue. Because I have worked with organizations and teams where the leaders said all the right things. Like they had me fooled. They said the right things. They used the right language. They had read the right things. They seemed like they were ready to really shift up their thinking and really be disruptive. And then part of it, I have to try to find empathy within me to be like, okay, maybe they thought they were. And then when the experience landed, maybe they were like, oh, wait, I do really love power. Oh, I love control. Oopsie. Like I thought that I could release some power. I thought that I could listen. I thought that I did have self-awareness. I thought that I had all these elements. And maybe they didn't, right? We really put it to the test in like the crucible of the learning journey. But oh, it's painful. And what I've hated is it's happened very rarely, but it only had to happen once or so. Someone quit after we were done with the challenge because they were frustrated in their job. And then here I come with this like exciting new framework that they can use to solve problems. They're deeply connected to the challenge now. They're deeply connected to stakeholders. They're finding amazing solutions. They feel powerful because people are listening. And then I'm done, right? And then the boss just reverts back to the old ways. And for some of them, it's the final straw. It's like, okay, after all of that, after all that we learned, you are just going to regress. Like, wow. And that I never would want that to happen. It's so hard. So I really try to ask different questions at the beginning of every engagement to get beyond the surface, like really understand the context of whatever challenge or opportunity they have, really understand their leadership, really understand the power dynamics before we get started, before we even engage more deeply, because I do not want to run into that stuff anymore.
Right. Yeah. I'm in a situation right now with one of my consulting partners where the client that we're working with just hasn't been honest about the issues, and it's been like pulling teeth. And we're like, why did you bring us in if you don't want to do this in a real way? And what we came to realize was that there's a little bit of a check the box kind of thing happening with the work that we were contracted to do. And it's breaking our hearts, and having to kind of figure out where, like you said, like it's an ethical line of like, you are here to deliver something. And can you deliver that without enough of the buy-in and kind of participation from the folks you're working with?
Yes. Yeah. The very last chapter of the book is called Dear Leaders. And it was just all the stuff that I've learned from working with leaders of like, I need you to be better. I need you to be better and understand these elements of what your teams are looking for, what your organizations and communities are looking for, what they need you to do in the work. And again, I try to balance that with empathy to understand that leaders often feel very lonely. They feel like they do have to make all these decisions. They're supposed to know all the answers. They can't go to their other executive team members or staff about some of the challenges they're having, whether it's so-called imposter syndrome or whatever it is that they feel like they're lacking or, feel fragile around. Yes. And like, you're in the leadership role. I don't know what to do for you. Right. And self-awareness is so key. I think that's the biggest thing that I often challenge the leaders around is their say versus do. And I check in with leaders on a regular basis when I work with teams, and I use like a motivational interviewing technique where it's like, you've said you want this, and these were your goals when we spoke, and yada, yada. And what I'm seeing is this, and this, which is an exact, violation of the things, or derailing your own goals and focus. So what do you make of that? Like, what might we do to remedy this or to go deeper into this? And some people want to go on that part of the journey and other people don't.
Yeah.
It depends. Yeah.
I want to come back to the writing of the book and just, I'm so grateful that you put this out into the world, because I really do think that this is going to be so helpful. And I think people are going to be able to see themselves in it so much and get so much out of it. How was your process of writing the book? How did that feel to like go through? Because I have always thought about writing a book as being a profound act of self-love, because it is hard. Or maybe it wasn't hard, but there's like, so it's like birthing something new.
Yes. I love the idea of act of self-love. I I feel like, and I've talked to different authors about their processes and how long it took them. Some friends, it took like 6 years to get their book, straight, just in their head, like get it figured out. Because there's so many ways and so many directions that you could take it. For me, I've been wanting to write the book for so long. And my previous co-founder was like, no, we're not going to write a book. She has a family member who's written a ton of, he's very well known. He's written a bunch of like leadership books. And we even interviewed him and he was like, do not write a book. It's terrible. It's not going to get you what you want. And I was like, what? So when she, God bless her, we're still great friends. When she wasn't my co-founder anymore, I was like, I think I'm going to revisit that dream. Because I think it needs to exist. I need to speak to myself that was, more than a decade ago. I need to talk to other people that are so frustrated and let them know they're not alone. These are why I think how we're messed up and how we got here. And then I need to share the framework. I really want people to know there's simple steps that they can start to make that don't have to feel overwhelming and overbuilt. And they're written by someone who uses them all the time. And, built them with the nonprofit sector and local government work and even philanthropy in mind. And I wanted to share all the awesome stories that I've, collected in my heart and my brain and my mind for so long of how people need to know what it looks like in real life. Because when you introduce a new framework or a new way of working, they're like, yeah, right. And there's so many stories I wish I could have had, but the book would be too long. So it was really, that for me was cathartic to really get that out and to share it. And I think I was so ready. It was like the perfect moment where it came to be. I followed my same process that I teach other people to use. Like, okay, I have a lot of uncertainty. I've never written a book. I don't know anyone really, close to me who has. I'm going to go interview a bunch of different authors. So I interviewed a bunch of people that self-published, hybrid, and like a book deal with a book proposal, learned about all those different elements. So I chose hybrid for myself because it made the most sense. And then I had 2 people that I had interviewed that I had published with Page 2. It's a woman-led organization out of Vancouver. And so I met one of the co-founders, Jessie Finkelstein, and we just hit it off instantly. And I just loved her way because I had talked to other publishing companies and we did not hit it off. They kept trying to morph the book. They're like, oh, this could be a business book too for profit. And I was like, no. You do not get my vibe. Like, you're not my people. She got it instantly. And they really care about books focused on social impacts and really, transforming the world. And so I talked to Jessie. I sent her, all I had was the first 30 pages of the book written. I had no outline. I had no book proposal. That's all I had. And it was like a step above stream of consciousness. Like, I think there were some pretty well-placed periods. Were kind of coherent. Sent that to her and she was like, yep, we're going to do this. And I didn't know it then, which is good, is, they only accept about 10% of sort of the pitches or proposals that come their way, which I'm so glad I didn't know that because I would have been like, intimidated. No, thanks.
Yeah.
That's too scary. So I walked around this room in my office for 3 weeks and I wrote the book in 3 weeks. I just voice dictated into my phone and transferred everything to a massive Google Doc. And I just acted as if I was giving like the most thorough workshop of my life. So I really just worked from my slides. And then I just made sure like I made every point, anything I ever want to think about. So I had to really sit in each of the topics. And then I went through my, I have like a database of stories that I've kept over the years. And I went through there and was like, okay, which stories best illustrate like the point I'm trying to drive home with this? So I just kind of formed it like a puzzle and kept shaping it and then, editing. And there we are.
I love that so much. I love that process because I think one of the things I like to do on this podcast is just to demystify some of those things. And I've had people who've wanted to be on the podcast before who have written books. And I'm like, will you please tell me about your process of like writing the book? Because it's, to me, that's so interesting. Like what you just shared. And some people are like, no, I don't want to tell anybody about it. It was awful. It was torturous. Like, I don't want to talk about it at all. And I'm like, oh, but I want the real stuff. Like, I want something, I want to understand really, that's I also love the fact that you have a database of stories because you and I are so similar in so many ways. And that is like how I roll too. Like,
totally. I love aha moments. Like I'm addicted to aha moments. I never knew our community members felt that way. I never thought X, Y, and Z. And it's like, boom, yes, like woohoo. All right, let's go. So what I do is I have my agenda. I have a really detailed, like literally minute by minute agenda that I use to keep the flow of my workshops. And on the back of it is where I write all of those insights. And so I get to take those, back home after I'm done with an event or, a 2-day training. And I just get to look through those. And some of them, when I read them a second time, I'm like, okay, less remarkable than I thought. And then other ones, I'm like, it's going in the list. And so I'll kind of add it and a little bit of context in there. So it is a fun practice. I encourage everyone to do it because it's very fulfilling. It's very exciting to add more.
Yeah. I mean, when you're your own boss too, you're not reporting to you don't have a performance report at the end of the year. So it's like you have to like find those like little moments for yourself.
And sometimes teams don't know how to pull them out of themselves. It's so funny. I was working with a team and they were at the end of their whole experience with me, which is about, 4.5 months that they had taken to go through all the process. And they were getting ready to do their final presentation to like the directors and leaders of the organization. And I was like, okay, so here's all the stuff we've accomplished. Anything else we need to add? We really want to show like, okay, boom, here's all the cool stuff. And this one of the guys on the team was like, well, I did totally streamline this application that we use with community members. And I've totally changed our funding mechanism for this. And it was like, hello, like even the stuff that he had done, like he didn't even have time to pause and really think about, oh, wow, like beyond what our team accomplished collectively, I individually made a huge impact in my individual work. And so I think all of us are just moving so quickly, right? It's hard to stop and be like, good job, pat on the back.
Yeah. And so much of the change making aspect of things is like slowing down that hustle culture in some ways too. Oh, yes. And kind of challenging those bad practices, right? So I'm glad that you're like actively modeling that too.
Oh, trying. All we can do is try, right?
I do so much work with like all the various stakeholders in their, in an organization as well too. But could you explain to folks who might not necessarily know why that's important, like why it's actually important to connect with stakeholders?
Oh gosh, yes. Well, what we typically do in this sector, and I have an image that's in the book and I use it all the time. I use it everywhere, is the giant triangle of waste is what I call it. But it's this visual of, when we hit an area of uncertainty, right? There's an issue or there's an opportunity. It could be bad, like, oh darn it, this is not working. Or it could be like, what if? We just work in our own little silo and we just say, I know what we should do. Well, let's move forward because our body hates the discomfort that's caused by uncertainty, right? That's like the anxiety, the stomachache, the backache, all of that. So we're trained to create, we're trained to jump to solution, we're trained to brainstorm. That these are habits and how we problem solve. And they often go unacknowledged and uninterrogated. But it starts with like identifying there's a problem. And then we just start to do a bunch of research. We find all those best practices and don't even get me started on that. We talk to our peers, we do all this research. And then someone with power, right, gets shown these menu of options usually. Which one do you think will work? And then this person who hasn't talked to anyone else in the organization often, hasn't talked to anyone in the community, is like, based on my lived experience, which is highly problematic when most of our sector is like white upper middle class folks, based on my experience, I think this will work. And so then they put everyone into execution mode. We start going to implementation. We start building and designing. And then at the very end, we're like, ta-da, here you go, stakeholders. I made this for you, which is so problematic. And we act as if stakeholders have not been already working on their own solution because they're not just running around with their arms in the air. And we're not taking not advantage of, but like we're not incorporating the abundance and the assets and all the capital that all of our stakeholders inside our organization and outside have. We're just thinking that we're expert and we have it figured out. And then we get pissed off when at the very end, when we do our grand reveal, when people are like, I don't want that. Or no, I won't play along with the new policy or process. You don't even understand my actual problems. So you've now harmed me and I no longer trust you. And so if we would just work in different ways, if we were to actually talk to stakeholders early and continuously to co-design solutions, that's actually how you create impact. That's the key, is to talk to folks inside the organization if there's anything that's going to impact them, which everything does, and talk to anyone outside the organization who's also impacted, and just be compassionately curious and engage them in designing the actual solutions that will create impact and testing it before we build. We create so much waste with using that giant triangle model without any acknowledgement. And we're doing it across every community, every city, every county, every state, every country. It's just mind-boggling how much we're creating that could be harmful and wasteful.
And it doesn't acknowledge those power dynamics that are at play.
Yes. I was just talking to someone today about the power issues make me feel like a misfit. And I already have, I'm already frustrated. I'm already a troublemaker. And I was thinking about the word misfit, and I was like, I'm a misfit. Like the work that I do doesn't quite fit like with the traditional nonprofit and philanthropy and, even local government. It's aligned, but it's a little bit different in local government. Like it just doesn't fit this broken system. And it's not even broken, like poorly designed, a wickedly designed in some cases system. So it's like, what do we do with people like me, like you, that are like, I don't want to play the game. I can't. So what's the new game? What's the new process? What's possible? And trying to find new pathways to create that. It's just, working within the current system is just not doable. I don't even know how much of it is salvageable in some cases.
Oh, yeah. Yep. You talked about it earlier, like the tension of working in these kinds of systems that are in internal cultures that are so problematic and toxic, and also so wanting to tear it all down while also simultaneously have to doing the work inside of them. And I think naming that I think there's so many people who relate to that, because like, well, where else am I supposed to go to do this kind of work?
Yes.
Like, where else do I do, meaningful, impactful work in the world? And we lose people all the time from the nonprofit sector to the for-profit sector because they just they can't continue to stay in those kinds of working within those systems that are just so, I don't want to say broken because they're operating as intended, but those systems that are not serving in so many ways.
Oh yeah. And, we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg of what's to come. I mean, that article that dropped a couple weeks ago about how executive directors and CEOs are leaving to become consultants. Fascinating. The lack of succession planning in most organizations. Founders and some of those micro and small organizations, right? When their founders burn out, their founders pass away, their founders have to move on to something else, the entire mission organization dissolves. We are not set up we're not valuing people. We're not paying people what they're worth. We're not investing in professional development and training and true capacity building. We're not doing any of those things. And then we wonder why we're having, a mass exodus and having such trouble creating impact. It's just, we're working within this bizarre system with these bizarre expectations.
Yeah. Yep. Especially you work more in philanthropy than I do. So it's like, it's the things that some of the expectations that are coming from that sector to nonprofits is so overwhelming too. And then the expectations we put on, like, just because you're working in municipal governments as well too, like seeing the ways in which they are functioning and working and everything, there's so many expectations put on them too. So we've had an inflation of expectations, it feels like.
Yeah, well, I think, at the root of it, which has been bubbling up more and more for me, is this root of perfection. This root of, it's just ridiculous. I don't even know what to call it. It's the expectation that we're going to create this program for these people in this short amount of time, and it's going to create these measurable forms of impact. And we're supposed to get it right the first time.
Right.
And then if we don't get it right, we get punished.
Yep.
Right? Like the word will spread in the community. Other funders talk to other funders. They're going to say like, well, don't fund them because they goofed up this project or they failed. Right. And then you get this practice of dishonesty where people are not really talking about what's working and what's not. They're not measuring things because no one has evaluation budgets or trained evaluators within their organizations. And there's no funding built into any of these grant mechanisms for actual impact and evaluation. And then it's silly to even measure some of this stuff if you give someone 1 year of restricted funding, like seriously, right? And so it's just this dishonesty within the sector where no one's talking about the truth. No one's actually saying, like, if these foundations would give more than their, that whole ceiling versus floor of what they're supposed to divest each year, if corporations would actually pay taxes, if if all of these systems and structures that are built upon oppression would actually be challenged and changed, we would have a very different looking society. Like, we don't want to have those deeper conversations. So we just keep talking about, like, well, we're gonna improve our grant application by a tiny smidge, and we're gonna say we're trust-based philanthropists, and we're not.
Right.
And we're gonna do this, that, and the other, and it's just smoke and mirrors. We're gonna adopt DEI strategies, right? How much of that did we hear? And then it just completely evaporated now with no accountability. Yep. So there's this dishonesty and this lack of accountability that's pervasive throughout the sector, and it's laced with those power dynamics. And yeah, that's the harm and the foolishness. And what's the most heartbreaking is that there's beautiful and amazing people that show up every day to do this work with integrity, humility, love, care. And it's like, what is there for them? And that's what we really have to focus on. Those are those frustrated change makers that need the most support and are showing up each day and doing the best they can. And how do we support them in doing a bit better?
I was just talking about, I've done a lot of work in the state of New Hampshire now with the Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, and they do amazing, amazing work. And they have obviously the coalition of all the crisis centers across the state. And I've just been having conversations with these folks, and I'm like, those people are just doing such amazing, amazing work. And I am grateful that I get to support them in the very, very small way that I get to through the project that I'm doing. And also, I just want so much more. I want more money for them. And you and I probably want that too. We want more money. We want more support. We want more everything. And I think that's probably being a frustrated change maker too, is you see that need, you see that like gap, and you want to be able to close it too. And also knowing that you are one person trying to do that. So there's a ripple effect, I think, though, through the work you're doing and through the book, certainly too, of being able to have those like ripple effect of good.
And, people like you and other people that we respect and admire, right? That are doing amazing work with radical participatory design, with Victor Odoewa, with, Tanya Anaisi with Baitna doing liberatory design work. And Dr. Leslie Ann Noel, I would say, with her amazing work with the Designer's Critical Alphabet and the Wheel of Positionality and Black Experience in Design. There are so many people that I am so fortunate to know and to spend time with and to talk to and be inspired by. So I feel like I'm continually being taught new lessons, new ways to see the world, how to go deeper with my empathy, how to go deeper with my practice. How do I show up differently, right? Because we have to keep evolving. We have to keep learning. None of us has it figured out, right? So it's like having that humility to say, I don't know, and I don't know what I don't know, and I'm just going to keep learning and trying to do more. And, also the last piece I want to add is that so many people, when they hear that I work with local government, say, oh, bureaucrats, like, oh, it must be just horrible to work with those people. And I have to always correct them and say, no, some of those individuals are some of the most passionate I've ever worked with. Like, they're so committed to their community. Often they live, work, play, raise their families, support their families in those communities. They care about what happens to the air, to the water, to the functionality of it, to the care and love and support of it. And I think we forget that. We just decide that, like, an entire group of individuals we don't know, it's just, they're causing a whole different type of trouble, right? They're slowing everything down. They're making everything so hard. And while that is possible in some cases, we just don't know about all the beauty that lies within these awesome people.
Well, I mean, it's like we said, it's like the othering aspect of things that we always like to do, because if we don't understand something, it's so much easier to put them in a bucket of like, oh, they're the others. And it's so much easier to throw shade. And there's a quote that my friend Bao always uses, and from this woman, Mary Lou Kanaki, I think is what it is. But it's just like, and I'm going to paraphrase because I can't remember it, but it's like, once you know somebody's story, you can never you can't do anything but love them when you know somebody's story.
Yes. Oh yeah. And that's the power of empathy. And, that's why that's a huge pillar of the framework, is to show up with empathy, but to understand that there's positives and negatives with empathy, that empathy does not really mean walking in someone else's shoes. I'm really tired of hearing that because it's impossible. Yep. Especially with a series of conversations, you are never going to understand what it is to be in their body, to be in their life. It's impossible. But what we can is we can make room for their story to sit next to ours, and their multiple stories and their evolving stories and their intersectionality and all those, elements to sit next to ours, and their truth can be just as equally valid and amazing as ours. And that stands for anyone, right? I know as we cruise closer and closer to I shouldn't say cruise, as we like rumble full of like a road of potholes and like, darting objects towards the election and other things. Like, it's so easy to be like, I'm out. Those people, do that othering practice, right? But like, to more deeply understand the why behind people's thinking and actions is so important. And yes, when you hear those stories, we see each other's humanity. That's why story is so important. Like, we see each other's humanity. We see the similarities. We see the differences. We can carry those stories with us. And that's the beauty of it, but also the difficulty, right? That adds to that burnout. That adds to that feeling of overwhelm that we feel as change makers, because we know there's so many people that are in pain and that need support. So yeah, it's mixed. It's hard. It's part of being a human, right?
Right. Oh my goodness. Talking about stories, like, is there any story that feels particularly resonant from your work that kind of like hits you right in the heart that you could share with us?
Yeah, and there's one. It's not a sexy story. It's so funny. It's not a sexy topic. It was a challenge around invoicing. And when the team brought it, we're like, snooze fest, boring, like invoicing. Really, people, come on. This is what you want to focus on. But it was an organization that had spent about, I don't know, I think they said about 13 years they had this invoicing process, and they knew it sucked. But they had the power to not do anything about it. And they were a pass-through organization that took federal funding that was then disseminated to probably about like 40 plus nonprofits in the community. And every month they had to go through this process where they, filled out this paperwork, submitted it, and they would get a substantial amount of money that they would then use to pay their own payroll and their own nonprofit staff. And so, essential process, right? So important. And we thought, okay, well, let's go see what's there, what's going on. And they interviewed this one woman, and I won't say her name, but none of us forgot her name. And she was saying, I'm the only one in my organization that knows how to complete the paperwork. I have been doing it for many, many years. Because it's always due around the same time at the beginning of each month, I have missed weddings, funerals, vacations, because if I'm not here, no one will submit it, and then my colleagues will suffer. And that they had that exact reaction you just did. They were like, our audacity and our power hungry ability to not mess with something that we knew was broken, like to not even do anything about it. We've literally impacted people's lives like this person. Like, we have frustrated them. We have enabled them, missing all these things. And so they interviewed some more people, and the rest of the entire time we worked together, they were like, this is for that person. Like, they just had her as like this vision of who they wanted to help. And this was really interesting too, because when they first went to talk to her, because of the power dynamic, she was like, the process is fine. Everything's fine. And they were like, no, show us how it works. So just watching her use the invoicing process was like painful. And then to hear the story behind it was even worse, right? And so it was amazing is this team really rallied, and they started looking at their internal resources to make some changes and try to, do simple stuff like pre-filling an Excel spreadsheet and things like that, like simple solutions. And they kept testing it. They kept going back to those same people and being like, how's this? What will work better? What do you think about this? Show me. And what was awesome is when they had, gotten to like, I don't know, probably like 80% completion of like whatever the new process would be, they totaled up the amount of time that they had saved. And it was 800 hours a month.
Oh my God.
Across one community by them improving this invoicing process, which again, not sexy, but super powerful. And then the team just got like so excited about that outcome and what was possible. And this was in 2.5 days. They had uncovered all of these new ways to work. And then they had worked a couple weeks on refining. They said, our annual renewal process also sucks. And this other process totally sucks too. How might we, do a similar process and really uncover what's possible? And so they did. They just started like taking all this stuff that sucked that they hadn't touched because they could, and they just started playing with it. And so it launched this huge ripple within the agency. It was so cool.
I am astounded by that. And like you said, the audacity. I cannot believe that poor person had missed so many important life events to do administrative work how horrifying. Sorry. I need to like take a minute to like not be so angry about that. That is wild.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking and also amazing but also why did it get to that point? Why 13 years?
I hate it, but there's so many stories of like, why do we do it this way? Right. And then once they start to look at it, they're like, oh, we don't have to do it this way. And then just by co-designing some simple changes, some of them are like the lowest of hanging fruit, right? It's like, it's right there for the taking. Like you could absolutely shift everything with this one thing. And they're like, oh, okay. And then they test it, right? We don't just have the idea and we're like, that sounds pretty cool. Let's just build that whole thing. No, it's like, this could be cool. And we have like 40 other options as well, because we're really focusing on abundance. And let's test these assumptions before we build it. And then we get to make these decisions with so much confidence and clarity. We know what's actually going to help people. And that just elevates the work in a whole new way. It just brings everyone to life. It's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that story. That is like changing how I think about things so much. I'm going to be thinking about that for days, if not weeks. Like,
what it makes me think of, and this will also hopefully like set you aflame, is Mike O'Brien. He's the founder of Human Nature. He's in Philly. He's a genius. He said this thing, and I think he's been on Possibility Project, I think twice now. But he said this thing where he said, when I'm paraphrasing, when we create a process, a policy, a program, anything, a form, we are creating and imagining the future for others. So like, seriously, you are sitting there in your audacity and your positionality in your lived experience, and you're saying, I think we're going to create this thing. And when you create that thing, which just seems so passive, but so benign, like it couldn't cause trouble. Like we're trying to help. We're altruistic. We're trying to meet the need. All the things, our white savior brains tell ourselves in many cases, and the rest of us say in the sector. No, like you're literally imagining the experience of what they're going to feel like when they walk into the waiting room, of what it feels like when they, have to fill out a form that's probably only available in English, right? When you ask them to go through a process, when you ask an employee, like, okay, you're going to show up Wednesday at 10 a.m. to be trained on a whole new process for which you were never consulted. And no one even understands what you do in the agency, but you have to show up Wednesday at 10 or you're not compliant and you have to change the way that you work. Like, what? And so there's so many, I think about that all the time. Like we have such power. If we create something from nothing, we have such power to really delight people. But we just don't do that. We don't value that. We value that urgency, that rush to solution, that, we want to resolve our own anxiety, our own uncertainty. We just want to jump to it. But in that process, we have so much missed opportunity, and we have so much opportunity to create harm. So it's, it's so important.
I want everybody to start thinking like you do.
Oh, me too. I agree.
Yep. Just like just those unconscious ways in which we create harm, and it adds up. All of those little bits add up,
Oh my gosh. Yes. And what's interesting is that not every day do we experience something new, right? Some days are pretty humdrum and we just kind of go about our ways. But an interesting experience that I've had is my partner is recovering from cancer. And so we've been going through this. He had never applied for like state-based healthcare, like access. And so he has state-based healthcare, and he's never had that. And applying for that was just fascinating. Going to the building, sitting in the chairs, surrounded by our fellow community members, our number being called or not. Like, it was just a wicked, wicked experience. And then going through the Social Security disability process is so horrible. It is so demoralizing. It is just, the questions they ask on the forms are just, I think, meant to send you to a deep depression if you already aren't in one. The ways that we've interacted with their staff, the things that they've required and demanded, and the rate at which they reject people is just so, it literally is wicked. That's the only word I really can think about it. And I know we throw around like wicked problems. We kind of joke around it. It's like a startup word now. No, like it's horrible. Like, I cannot tell you how painful it's been to go through these. And I feel so lucky at the same time to have gone through them, because my level of empathy is so much deeper. And it's something that I do want to spend time writing about, because I think people don't know what's actually happening. Because when I tell our friends and family, give them updates, they find out what's happening, they're horrified about the stuff that we're experiencing. And we're experiencing it as U.S. citizens speaking English with advanced degrees, lots of experience navigating systems. I literally help organizations revise their entire processes, right? And I'm going through it. And it's an amazing experience. It's really hard to describe, like the pain and the pleasure of seeing it both. But there's so much work to be done. Yeah.
So glad you're grateful for it. And also, I'm glad you went through it so you can understand it. And also, I wish you didn't have to, or anybody had to go through it, because it's like there's so much lack of dignity in those processes too. And I think, I think going back to what you were talking about before, it's like it's empathy that you're infusing into this, and like visibilizing the unintended harm. But I also think that you are adding dignity back into these processes that you're helping folks with too. And I don't know, I couldn't put a price on that necessarily. Like the idea of being able to allow folks, stakeholders, to weigh in on these things does feel like a return to dignity in some way that we just don't always we don't always think about a process and how it feels for people.
Yeah. Yeah. We just think, well, we wrote it in the grant. We have to execute on it. Right. Oh, it's what we've always done. We don't even know if it works anymore or ever works. We're just going to keep doing it. It's my job. I'm there to lead that program. Yeah. And it's like, we're not pausing to ask those different questions. And that's why I called the framework the pause framework. Yeah. Because that's like the first essential step that we all have to take, is just to really stop what we're doing and say, is this actually making a difference? And who says, like, who are we talking to know if it's making a difference? And even interrogating evaluation itself, it's not like that's holy and it can't be touched, right? There's so much problematic stuff going on in evaluation work and impact measurement, but we just have to stop. We have to stop. And I think it is like definitely a return to dignity, a return to humanity, just acknowledging our interconnectedness, our mutuality. And like, that's where the beauty lies. Like those are where the solutions lie.
Yes. I love that. I'm so grateful, Heather, that we're having this time together and I could talk to you forever. But I want to ask you, what does it mean for you to give a damn?
I was thinking about this. For me, it's like we only have so much time on this planet, which is unknowable, right? We don't know if the proverbial bus is coming tomorrow. We don't know. But it's like, where can I use my energy? Where can I use my voice? Where can I use my power? Where can I use my absolute love of connecting people and things, right? Like, how do we use what we enjoy most, what we're best at, to really help? And so that's what it means to me, like, to give a damn, is to step outside of ourselves and say, okay, there's so much going on, like, have the awareness to what some of those challenges are. And then what are my talents and gifts and superpowers that I have? Because we all have at least one, right? How do I bring that in service to this greater good? How do I bring it to, to love and care and connection? Like, what part could I play? And even if we think, some people will be like, well, I don't have a talk show, I haven't written a book. Like, it doesn't matter. It's those ripples can be, so powerful, and most of them we will never know, but we'll never create them if we don't try, if we don't get started.
There's a couple of like instances that sparked for me, stories for a different day, but where I've heard about the ripple effect I've had on somebody, but years later. And I'm just like, oh, I like in examples of things I don't even remember having a conversation or how that like impacted somebody. And that's partly why I like, the fact that you have a book, I have a podcast. Like there's just ways for us to be able to do that. And like you said, people are doing it in small ways all the time without even realizing it. And it feels good.
It does feel good. I mean, anything can be an inspiration. Anyone can be an inspiration. Yes, there's parts of like, how do we look at life? That's part of the growth mindset and the ways that you go about your journey. But so much potential out there, as much as, we want to burn it all to the ground. And it is frequently and currently on fire. Like there's still hope. There's still emergence. There's still possibility. There's still humans. So, there's still things that can happen.
Yeah. And we do need to take a pause in order to be able to like really tap into that.
Yes.
That's my very dorky pun. Sorry.
I like it. That it works well. It works well. Pause is also helpful that way too.
My colleague and I who do consulting work together, we had an interview for a new project last week, and I literally said some kind of a terrible, terrible pun. And I was like, if we work together, you're going to get more of those puns. And then they ended up accepting our proposal. So it was awesome.
Yay! They're like, did we accept it for less puns or one?
Right, exactly. I'm like, we'll write it into the contract in this number of puns every day. No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, I love it. I am
such a dork. It is. I appreciate being able to do this work in the world and be as fully dorky as I am, and people love it.
I am, like I told you, those aha moments when I just get so excited. I can't hold that back from my team. Like one of my recent teams, I said to them, like, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but like, I love you. Like, I love you. I was like shouting it at them, and they were just giggling. And they're honestly like one of the best teams I've ever worked with. They were just individually so just fascinating and powerful and amazing. Like, I wish I just could have had like 8 coffees with each of them.
Yeah.
And then together, they had never worked together before, even within the same organization. And they just gelled and vibed and appreciated and cared for each other. It was just gorgeous. And then they created these, really great aha moments that they generated. It was fantastic. And I just, that's where I'm dorky. It's just like, I love you. Like, I'm not going to restrain it. Watch out. And they're just like, okay. And I just feel like I'm supposed to be like, I am your consultant. I arrived on an airplane. I have so much expertise. You said me. But instead, I'm just like, love. I'm just total goober. But I love the work, and I'm not going to contain it.
Yeah. Nope. I'm honestly like, I think that's just if more people could show up authentically themselves, the better the world would be. And listening to you is making me feel so much joy too. It's just like I want to be joy buddies.
Exactly. Oh yes, definitely. I was thinking like it's fun to celebrate like those awesome teams and those awesome connections, because it offsets the leaders. So we talked about earlier, and those teams where you're just like, come on, like, are you awake? Are you alive? Do you care what is happening here? So it's all this delicate balance and interweaving, right? Of like, you have your joy buddies, you have your things, or horrible buddies. Like, who do I call? But it's the core is connection, right? Absolutely.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm going to wrap us up. And the one last question, because I do love this question. If you could pick one person who could listen to this podcast, who would it be?
Oh my gosh. And part of me wants to be snarky.
I love snark too.
I'm not going to like say their name, but like I'm imagining faces of individuals that have been like, we're not going to work with you, or we're not ready, or we don't have enough, our strategic planning is not wrapped up, or our new gala is coming. It's like, oh gosh, like I want all of them to listen, because it's like, wake up. But what came to mind was that I am really so intrigued and so like fortified by this idea of being part of a lineage of like unknown ancestry of fighters, of troublemakers, of frustrated change makers. And so I'd be so curious, like if one of them were to hear this, who knows what era, right? It could be any time. Like, are things the same as it was for them with like a different fish, right? Like, did they say the same words? Were they fighting for the same thing? What's evolved and changed? What's not? What hasn't, right? It's like, that is so fascinating to me. And even like a little time capsule, like what would someone say in 100 years, listening to me? Would that just feel so strange because so much had transformed? Would it feel familiar because nothing had changed? Oh gosh, it's like soul crushing. But like, that's fascinating to me. It's just, I'm not the only one that's caused trouble, right? I'm surrounded by amazing right now, for me, after me. If we want to be pluriversal, like in multiple universes, right? Multiple things are happening. That is fascinating to me. So that's my answer.
I love that. I love that so much. Yeah. I haven't really thought about the legacy of change of like myself within that kind of legacy of change over a long time, and whether things are going to be the same or not. Like, so that, thank you for like saying that, because now I'm thinking in a much more expansive way. I always think about like I had said before, like the planting of the seeds, and I know that that's the harvest comes much later. But yeah, that idea of a much longer time horizon is very interesting.
Well, I think it's a cool question for you to think about, like, which seeds did you harvest to be you?
Now we have to talk about philosophy. No, I'm just kidding. All right, that'll be the topic for the next time we talk. No, that's a good point, though. Oh my goodness.
Who planted what for you and when? And that you were like, this is me. This is what I care about. This is what I give a damn about. This is what I'm going to cause trouble about. Yeah.
Okay, well, that just like blew my mind. So thank you.
I love it.
That's another thing that I'm going to be pondering for like weeks now. I'm so glad we went from like the invoicing story, which blew my mind, to now I have like this deep philosophical thing I have to think about. That's like the mark of a good conversation, though. If you can make invoicing mind-blowing.
Yes. Awesome. Yes.
Heather, thank you so very much. This was absolutely amazing. I'm so glad to have you as a joy buddy, and I'm so glad that we did this. And just thank you so much for your time and energy, and I cannot wait for people to see this.
Thank you. So much fun. I'm just honored to be here. I'm so thankful to Leah for introducing us. And yeah, keep making good trouble.